You're listening to BQN. Assimilate the audio.
A man has a choice. I chose the impossible. I built a city where the artist would not fear the censor, where the great will not be constrained by the small, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality. I chose to build rapture.
Welcome to the Bargain Bin Gamer. I'm your host, Davey, and this is the show where I dive headfirst into the cheapest and shittest games out there so that you don't have to.
If your life were the prize, would you kill the innocent? Would you sacrifice?
Today, we're doing things differently. For the first time on BBG, I am joined by a fellow gaming enthusiast to do a retrospective on an iconic game. So please, sit back, relax, pump yourself up on plasmids as we deep dive to the bottom of the ocean in our retrospective of the 2007 classic Bioshock. This is Then and Now. I am very, very excited to be joined today by a very close friend of mine. He's done a lot of work with me on my other show, the Trexperts Quiz. It is Sam Johnson. Sam, hello there.
Hello, Davey. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for being the first person to join me on Bargain Bin Gamer in a more conversational style podcast as opposed to me just talking to myself on the Twitch stream or just talking to no one in my video reviews.
No, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so excited to talk about Bioshock.
Let's just point out the straight elephant in the room. So this is called the Bargain Bin Gamer, spelt Gaymer. But am I to believe, Sam, that you're an actual heterosexual? Is that true?
Yes. Yes, Davey. Unfortunately.
Okay, well, look, no, I'm a big fan of your culture. So it's wonderful to have you here because, look, we're all about diversity here on the Bargain Bin Gamer. But Sam, how about we dive straight into it? Would you like to tell us a little bit more about Bioshock?
Bioshock hit store shelves in 2007. It was directed by video game legend Ken Levine and was meant to be a spiritual successor to the game System Shock. System Shock, though, was set in space, and Bioshock is set at the bottom of the ocean. It follows protagonist Jack Ryan as he explores the long-abandoned city, discovering its secrets and facing off against its surviving populace.
I did not know that bit about System Shock, and I never played it. Have you ever played System Shock?
A long time ago. System Shock is an ancient game, worth a play though. It was really the first game to kind of put a full narrative into video games, and so when Bioshock came along, it borrowed heavily from System Shock. In fact, it was originally supposed to be on a space station, but they moved it underwater to kind of mix it up. And then it wasn't supposed to be a city. It was supposed to be like an underwater research station. But, eventually it turned into the metropolis that we know today.
A city where the artist would not fear the censor, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, where the great would not be constrained by the small, and where the sweat of your brow, Rapture can become your city as well.
Sam, it's 2007. The Xbox 360, the PS3, and the Nintendo Wii are only a few years old. The era of HD gaming is in full swing, and online tournaments are becoming more mainstream, especially on consoles. Here comes Bioshock, a very heavily first-person experience. So, Sam, take us back to when you first discovered this game.
Well, I was 12. So it was one of my first games on the 360. The 360 was really where my love of gaming kind of blossomed. I was a big Halo fan, which is another amazing first-person shooter. But Bioshock came about at a point in my life where I was going through a lot as a kid, and I wanted to escape into a world, and Bioshock came into my life like a wrecking ball, and it introduced me to narrative themes that I had not experienced before. It was really the first, touching of the horror genre, and so it was able to fully capture my imagination. I was diving deep into it. When I got into it, I think Bioshock 2 was just about to come out, so I was digging into the lore and there's a really amazing ARG that's set, I think, before the first game that kind of explores that lore really in depth. And just between the characters, the story, and the amazing gameplay for a game from 2007, it just blew my mind.
I don't know how you survived that plane crash, but I've never been one to question Providence. I'm Atlas, and I aim to keep you alive. Now keep on moving. We're gonna have to get you to higher ground.
It really was, for me as well, earth-shattering when it first came out. I remember, so I was not 12, I was in my 20s when it came out, so we'll just, yep, all right, sure. But I was always a mad gamer growing up. However, as I've mentioned on Bargain Bin Gaymer before, I went through a period where I missed a whole generation of gaming. So I owned a GameCube, so that was the console I had in that generation. However, I was very young, I had very little money, I had to sell the GameCube to pay rent 1 month, and I just never picked up gaming again until about 2006, when the HD consoles came out. So I remember I had a 360, and you could go on and you could go online to Xbox Live and you could download trailers. And I remember downloading the trailer for Bioshock, which was a very heavy CGI rendered non-gameplay trailer. But I still remember thinking, oh, wow, this looks intense. Because I don't know if you remember that trailer, but it's like a first-person view. I think you're in... It looks like you're a splicer, and you're trying to get a little girl and a little sister, sorry. And, same thing. The whole thing with the little sisters is weird, but we'll get on that later. But yeah, so in this trailer, you're trying to get a little sister for her Adam, most likely, and a big daddy attacks you. You manage to kill him, but then you look down and another big daddy just sticks his big chainsaw like right through the stomach. And I was like, whoa, this looks intense. And then I remembered playing it for the first time, and I'm like, okay, wow, this is the next generation of gaming. And I think that's probably why it still holds up so well today, because a lot of its mechanics, its ways of doing things, its storytelling, its incredibly connected world is set a template for a lot of things that came after it.
Yeah.
So tell me, Sam, we've both done fresh playthroughs in preparation for today. How did you find playing it now versus playing it back in the day?
Nothing's changed. It's still, it doesn't have any issues. I played it on PC, but it's available on every single major console, every single online platform like Steam, GOG, Epic Games. And the best part about Bioshock is that it perfectly sets itself in its era, which is the 1950s, and it doesn't ever break that time. There's nothing that pulls you out of it, so you're able to, whenever you go back to it, you can escape right back into it, and it's so much fun still. Absolutely so much fun.
Yeah, there was a few things about it for me. So I played it on PlayStation 5, the remastered version, which was fabulous. I played it on my big OLED TV, and it, definitely the remastered version looks better than ever. But, sure, there's probably games that look much more hyper realistic now, but I felt like I could still be playing a game that was developed today. One thing that was different for me, and you and I were chatting about this during our playthroughs, is that in order to be able to play it at a speed that would enable us to do this review soon, I had to put it on easy mode. And one thing I will say is that easy was too easy. And it kind of took me... I mean, yeah, I got to experience the story, but I can remember playing it back in the day, and it was always so low on health and always so low on ammo when I was playing it on the standard mode, and I was far more invested in hunting down every Big Daddy and collecting all the Adam from the Little Sisters so I could pump up my powers and be ready to face the final boss. What are your thoughts on easy versus medium? Like, right, I rarely go like hard anymore because I'm 40 years old. I don't have time for that shit. What about your easy and medium?
I prefer it too, but mostly because I like to take my time in games and kind of go through each area. And I was reading this wonderful book, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. Um, and what I love about this book, which is available on all platforms and Amazon, what you call it, it is so perfect that when you're in the game, you'll be walking, you'll be like, oh, there's Bill McDonough's Tavern, or oh, there's Hephaestus, or out the window there's Sir Chance, which is the casino, and it really kind of brings it more to life because I know the origin of that building, I know the origin of that store, and you can kind of put it together. But another thing I love about Bioshock is when you play on easy and you take your time, you notice that every dead body that is already there when you enter a zone has a story to it. You can see how that person died, how that person chose to die, how that person, made the decision to attack a Big Daddy, or stuff like that. And it's just those little nuggets of detail that I absolutely go crazy for.
I will say, though, on top of that, though, I do love how, regardless of what difficulty you're playing on, there is a lot to explore, and the game rewards you for taking risks. And I love a game that encourages you to take risks because you will find that pot of Adam, or that that safe that you can hack that's full of all kinds of fun little treasures that's going to make your playthrough easier or more fun. Bioshock's gameplay focuses on combining typical guns with the superhuman powers of the plasmids, powered by Adam, which we find out from the book comes from sea slugs. You collect the ladder from the Little Sisters, not the little girls, that haunt the halls of Rapture, presenting the player with morality choices: harvest or kill the Little Sisters for more Adam and more immediate rewards, or free them from their Adam-induced trances for less Adam and possibly be rewarded with a happier ending later on. In addition to this, you get to hack vending machines, turrets, you get upgrades to health, combat, and so on. The game presents a very in-depth first-person shooter experience. I want to touch on the morality choices first. So, Sam, this was not the first time players have been given morality choices. I think Fable on the previous systems was
Yep.
was very big on that as well. What makes Bioshock stand out above its contemporaries at the time and today when it comes to morality?
I think it's a much bigger question because, it's not a loot box. It's not, some blank choice that you'll hear about the results. You're killing a child if you choose the negative option, or you're freeing a child and you're helping that child live the rest of their life. And I think Bioshock does an amazing job of for a second you're like, maybe should I take this child's life?
No! 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 Thank you, mister.
It is, and it plays into the larger sort of strategic element of how you choose to play this game. It's a very linear first-person shooter experience for the most part, but there is a lot that you can do to enrich that experience. I will admit, when I did play it when it was first released and I was playing on harder difficulty, I killed a few of the little sisters because I needed that health upgrade, or I wanted an extra plasmid slot, because you could go into different situations and be like, all right, I need this particular group of plasmids because it's a part of the game where I'm being assaulted by 100 splicers, and there's lots of movable objects and oil slicks around. So I really want to make sure that I've got the telekinesis or the sonic boom. Plus, I want the incinerator so I can set stuff on fire, right? And because you would die a lot more on the higher difficulties, you'd be like, all right, cool, I need to go to the plasmid place and fix this all up. So I'm using that to justify why I killed little sisters on the first playthrough.
It happens.
It does. You mentioned the creators there and some of their thoughts. I watched some of the bonus commentary that you can get on the collection, and they did sort of say, largely, people saved the little sisters. Largely.
Yeah, and actually the whole reason the Little Sisters exist is so people would save them, because originally when the game was in alpha, they weren't little girls, they were like frogs that had tubes coming out of them, and like
They were the sea slugs. Sea slugs.
exactly. And like, I get it, if you see a sea slug, you're probably gonna kill that sea slug. So
Yeah.
but yeah.
Oh, quick side note, but did you jump into the museum that you can get to in the remastered edition with the sea slugs as the original concept and all the other original ideas that were quite more grotesque compared to what we got with the Big Daddies?
Yeah, I love that museum because you really get a good look at what the game could have been and what the game ended up being, and what if they had more time and more money, could have been in the game. Another great thing to do is to play the challenge mode. Bioshock 1, I think all three Bioshocks have a challenge mode, but Bioshock's first challenge mode, you get to explore more of Rapture. Like, you go to a carnival and you find out that there were these amazing carnival attractions in Rapture, and then all this stuff that just builds upon the world. And so the secondary stuff is worth playing.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that was what's so great about it as a single player experience as well, is one, you can play through it probably a couple of times and you can explore different areas or make a few different decisions, because there are different endings that you can obtain. Now, you don't actually have to do all the things that the game tempts you to do. You don't have to hack vending machines. You don't have to hack turrets to get them to work for you. But again, you can take the risk And hey, you might get a little turret to kind of follow you around. I only hacked the flying turrets because I'm like, why hack the stationary ones? Like, what's that going to achieve for me? Were you a hacker? Did you hack a lot of stuff?
I hate the hacking. I hate that mini game.
Yeah.
Half or Bioshock's hacking mini game is so frustrating. I mean, it's a fun puzzle game, but the time limit they give you is not great.
So with all of that, what's your play style with BioShock? How did you approach? Because I know you played it on easy as well, but how did you approach it? What's your favorite plasmid? What's your favorite plasmid gun combo?
I love the telekinesis plasmid because you can pick up so many objects in the world and then use those as a weapon. But I love the old zap 'em and tap 'em. You know, you got the electrobolt in one hand and you got your pipe wrench in the other. Don't need anything else.
So Bioshock's Rapture is, as we've been saying, is a fully realized world that feels connected and alive. The story itself is extremely well thought out, and a prequel novel by John Shirley that we were talking about before provides extensive backstory to all of its characters. The game's narrative explores themes of free will, power, and the consequences of unbridled ambition, culminating in twists that challenge the player's perception of the story and their role. Bioshock itself is set, though the game is set in 1960, the book goes from just after World War II right up until 1959. So you as the protagonist, Jack, I believe your name is, survives a plane crash in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. He discovers a mysterious lighthouse which leads him to the underwater city of Rapture via a bathysphere, big bulbous thing that moves around under the ocean. Rapture, a once glorious utopia founded by the industrialist Adam Ryan, has fallen into chaos due to the unchecked use of the substance Atom. This genetic substance grants superhuman abilities through the plasmids, but also drives its users insane. Sam, you have told me that this is one of your favorite video game narratives of all time. Why is that?
I would say, combining the book, all three games, it is my favorite fictional universe. We're both huge Star Trek fans.
We are.
And I will say that I love Star Trek. There are hundreds of starship models and things throughout this house, but Bioshock is just this island all to itself. There's nothing really like it. And just from the very beginning, you're on the plane. The plane crashes. You're in the middle of the ocean. There should be nothing around you, but there's that giant lighthouse. You go inside the lighthouse, and it's beautiful. And there's the big statue of Andrew Ryan. But there's, in the distance, you can hear the song "Somewhere Beyond the Sea" playing softly, and it lures you into the bathysphere. And for a minute, you think, "Oh, this beautiful city under the water." But as you get closer and closer and closer to that docking port, you start to see the ruin and the decay, and there's no one in the windows, you know? And by the time you dock, it flips your expectations completely on their head. You're in an abandoned city almost, you know? It's falling apart. At any moment, the ocean could come crashing in and kill everyone in there, including you. And it becomes this frantic escape, and then it becomes this frantic revenge, and then it becomes a frantic escape again. So it really has its twists and turns, and if you take the time and collect the audio logs, you learn this beautiful story of it's a brilliant idea. Andrew Ryan, who is played by Star Trek alumni Armin Shimmerin, Quark from Deep Space Nine.
I did not know that.
You didn't know that?
No,
Yeah,
and that bit did not come up in any of the research I did for today, so I'm excited. We're learning here today on Bargain Bin Gaymer.
But another thing is you don't see where the story is going to go. There's a big twist and turn, and then, you know, people say there are two massive, you know, moments in video games where the story just makes you stop and go, what? And I think with this, it's one, you've been spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't played Bioshock. One, Andrew Ryan is your father. Two,
Mm-hmm.
you were created to destroy him. And
Mm-hmm.
three, the person who has been your best buddy, the guy talking in your ear, making sure that you're going to be okay, is the bad guy. And you don't see that coming. And the only other time in a video game where I've had a moment of what is the reveal in Knights of the Old Republic 1, where Darth Revan turns out to be the player character.
You're absolutely right. You were tempted into this world from the moment that you jump into the bathysphere and head down. It's like, whoa. And the HD beautifulness of it when it came out today meant that this looks incredible, and I want to explore it. I want to explore it, and I want to find out its mysteries, even if that means I have to pick up these weird audio logs, which people leave lying around everywhere. I will say, audio logs, even today, picking up notes and audio logs, it's like, what civilization does this, right? Like, it's not the Enterprise. This isn't a captain's log. You read the bloody book, and it's like, oh no, Andrew Ryan was just encouraging everyone to keep audio logs as a way of justifying. In fact, they justify a lot of the video game cliches in the book, which I found very funny. That being said, I liked the audio logs in this game because I wanted to know more about the background. Like, I wanted to know, how did this social experiment of sorts become so messed up? Because capitalism. But we will... Unchecked, unregulated capitalism, people, is the problem here.
Ryan and Adam. Adam and Ryan. All those years of study, and was I ever truly a surgeon?
Did I see the twist coming? I don't think so. I remember originally being very gobsmacked by the twist. One thing I didn't pick up on until I read the book just this past week, I didn't remember that you as the playable character were actually Andrew Ryan's son. Does that get referenced in the game?
There are two moments that directly reference that when you are in Fort Frolic, which is like the entertainment district of Rapture, which I'm sure we'll talk about whenever we get to Sander Cohen. But you go into Siren's Alley, I think it's called. That might be another area in Rapture, actually. But you go into what's basically a strip club. And there's this feature where the atom that you use to power yourself up is not, from the sea slug. It's been used, harvested, and recycled. And so you have these genetic memories. And when you go in there, you have this weird vision of Andrew Ryan brutally murdering his lover, who you have heard through all the audio logs. And that's your mother. That is the woman who sold the fetus to Fontaine and Tenenbaum and became you. And then later on, when you go through Ryan's office, right before you get to Ryan, there is this room where Ryan has been taking pictures throughout your journey in Rapture and connecting the dots, and he finally realizes it. And that's why when you go to kill him, he says,
"But know this, you are my greatest disappointment."
The "would you kindly," right? I very, very well done, because of course you as the player are going to follow the direction of the voice, who is literally giving you your next objective. That control then gets taken away from you when you meet Andrew Ryan, which I think is a very good way of doing things too, right? Because then, well, naturally, you're like, oh wow, I've been under control the whole time, and the game rips control off you and gets you to beat Andrew Ryan to death, which was a fairly unceremonious end for him. I feel like Andrew Ryan just kind of rolled over and died in that moment, right? And what do you reckon?
I see it a little differently. So this man has been locked in his office for at least a year. That's another thing. Jack Ryan is not even like 5 years old. Like he's a genetic experiment gone wrong. And so I think Ryan sees that there's no way to stop that brain control without kind of snapping him out of it. But also, I think Ryan realizes that the Rapture experiment is over. It's failed. There's no saving his city. And you know what? If he can't have it, no one can.
See, I don't know. I don't know if I buy that. If that's the case after reading the book, because like right up until the moment the book ends, he's determined that it's gonna turn around and go his way, and he was so against Fontaine, and then he's so against Atlas, who's really Fontaine because he's an altruist, but he's not. He's just a con man. So I don't know. I personally don't buy that Ryan was so willing to just roll over and die at that point. But that brings me to we're discussing the story, right? Let's touch on the book for a little bit, because it is actually a very, very good companion to the game. And I'll say to anyone out there listening or watching, if you love this game and you have not read this book, pick it up. It's quite good, right? It's not the finest of literature because it is a video game tie-in, but it expands on the story in quite a believable way. What are some of the main things about the book that were major revelations for you?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think there are two parts that I think I absolutely love in the book that kind of flesh stuff out. And one, that's the discovery of Adam, the creation of plasmids, and the weird things that happened when they tried to get that to work.
Yeah, it was an interesting read for me. It's quite an easy read too. I was done within a week. I liked that, it really drove home Andrew Ryan's ideals and how determined he was to build this city, but also it made sense that he built this massive city underwater because he was actually terrified of the nuclear bombs.
Yeah.
The book starts with him looking at images of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of World War II, and he's like, these people are going to tear each other apart. This world is going to tear each other apart. It's still happening, Andrew. It's still happening. So he built, and he doesn't want to. He comes from, the Soviet Union or from Soviet Russia, where socialism wasn't working out and communism wasn't working out too well for him. And then he found out, hey, guess what? It's actually just a thin veneer of freedom in the US. The capitalism is not a balanced thing. But then he kind of just creates an ultra-capitalistic society anyway, without any morals or values. Is his story in the book, is it... I can't tell. Is it pro-capitalism? Is it anti-capitalism? Has it got anything to do with capitalism at all? Can I say capitalism one more time?
I will say the game, the book, are amazing critiques of the philosophies of Ayn Rand. Ayn Rand, her book Atlas Shrugged, to kind of highlight
yes, of course. Yes.
is what directly inspired Ken Levine to change the story of Bioshock to be more in what it became. And I think it is saying, hey, these ideas are great, but execution is not going to work out if you focus on capitalism. And that's 100% what caused Rapture's decline, and that's what the book focuses on. Everything that goes wrong in Rapture could have been fixed if somebody was nice to somebody.
Yeah. Look, it is an interesting book. It's not without its flaws. I find that it focuses heavily on the main character is kind of Bill McDonough or McDonough.
I would say Bill McDonough is like the main character of the book, honestly.
Yeah, but he disappears for chapters and chapters.
Oh yeah, no. Well, another thing that happened when the book came out is they were about to release Bioshock 2. And so they had to shoehorn in the narrative plot to Bioshock 2 into the book. So you get these chapters where you're with Sophia Lamb, who is the main antagonist of Bioshock 2, or Johnny Topside's mentioned, which is the identity of the main character.
It's interesting. It's interesting the criticism and the things that emerge about games, movies, TV shows, and popular entertainment properties over time. One thing I've seen over and over again in top 10 lists and all that kind of stuff on YouTube is that the final confrontation with Fontaine / Atlas is anticlimactic.
Yeah.
Go! Go now! Hit it with the needle!
Why is that? Like, why do you think that's the case? I mean, it's fine. Like, I don't have any particular problems with it. I was over in seconds on easy mode, but did you have a problem with the final boss battle?
I don't like it. And I feel like it's very... It's the game is on such a high note, and then that last level, it's like the roller coaster went off the cliff. And I think that's just due to budgetary reasons and time and having to get the game out. And so they had to kind of tie up the narrative. And then, the girls give you the key to the city, but you rejected it. And then, you adopted them all and you lived happily ever after. So, and I really feel like there was more to that story. And I think if they had more time and maybe 2 more levels, they could have given it a much better naked Fontaine boss fight.
Yeah, it seems a bit odd, right? It's like I did not expect to see kind of weird Fontaine Adam pumped up Jesus up on his cross, and then it's literally just get all the Adam you can from him, and then it's over.
Yeah,
and I often have different thoughts about what a final boss should be like, especially in a game like this. That the boss. I wouldn't say that there's boss fights in this. There are kind of moments of climax, but nothing that I would call a boss fight. So it almost felt a little bit jarring in that regards as well, because don't be wrong, I love a good boss fight. This almost felt like it wasn't needed. I would like to explore on any game that we do this extended format on, any impactful meanings or takeaways or representation for the LGBTIQ community. This game has one obvious area of impact, area of representation, which is a character who is very queer-coded, and that is Sander Cohen.
Time was, you could get something decent on the radio. The artist has a duty to seduce the ear and delight the spirit. So say goodbye to those 2 blowhards, and hello.
Rapture's primary entertainer, actor, singer, and murderous jealous ex-boyfriend. Sander, to me, is a prime example of the depiction of evil characters being gay or queer. It's very cliche, and you don't, even in the early 2000s, you weren't seeing it as much. Yeah. However, both game and book leverage Sander's effeminate representation to enhance his overall evilness, you know what I mean? Because he's a dandy. And he's quite sick and twisted in the way that he enlists you to murder a group of people to display pictures of their corpses as a work of art. And if we take the book as canon, which I'm believing we do, the people you hunt down are more or less his ex-lovers or the wannabe thespians who likely had to, pleasure old Sander just to get some time on stage. It's like, oh, young fella, you want to be in the spotlight? You've got to get onto my spotlight. But Sam, question for you, right? So it's always interesting to hear the different perspectives on this, because obviously as a gay man with a lived gay experience, I see this thing, right? And I see it and I go, oh, here we go. Another queer character mincing around being the bad guy like every Disney villain. Jafar. Does this kind of thing stand out for you? Did you notice this growing up, that characters like Sander, like the bad guys, were so queer-coded like this?
No. I will say I grew up in rural Missouri, where I now reside, and especially in the early 2000s. Not so much now. Now Missouri is surprisingly progressive for a red state. At least the area I live in, which is in the St. Louis area, which is a huge area, so I don't mind saying that. And I will say I never picked up on it. The only reason I knew he was queer coded back then was a line from Fontaine when you first get to Fort Frolic, which is I think he's a Section 8, which, you know, I grew up watching MASH. I knew what Section 8 meant. So,
yeah.
And so it did that. But I don't, for me, at least the game, the book, what I do is whenever I'm working, I'm a paleontologist. And when I'm cleaning fossils or building an exhibit, I'll put on an audiobook. And so what I did was when I was working, I was listening to the audiobook. And one of the few things I really dislike about the audiobook is the voice they give to Sander, because in the game, he's very soft-spoken until he gets riled up, and he's very, you know, specific about what he says. And there's kind of a musical quality to his voice, and they just stereotype him in the book. And I hate that. Because Sander Cohen, I got to ask a question, actually, because I've been saving this question for this video. Did you kill Sander Cohen?
Not on this playthrough, no.
3 of 4. What's that look? You don't like it, do you? I don't need to be judged by you, by anyone. Screw you! Screw all you fucking doubters! Here's what I say to all of you!
It's more just, you know, the representation that matters more than anything. And I came across an article when I was looking into this by a website, Gaily Dreadful, from 2022, which has a bit of an essay on just the why this kind of representation was problematic. And also, something that's really, really difficult is the fact that, you know, Sander was an objectivist. And that was sort of the values of it. And if you kind of read into his character and read into the book, and also, you know, the fact that, you know, Rand herself, like, uses themes of rape, more or less, right? You know, and that's a very triggering term to use. But, you know, there is very much an insinuation that Sander is drugging people and having his way with them and all that kind of stuff. And that comes out more in the book than it does in the game. But, you know, it's not only are we at a time when queer rights were really in the middle of a battleground, which they are still, you know, here we have it felt a little unnecessary to me. But people will, of course, argue, well, it's meant to be in the 1950s and the 1960s. And there were theatre queens like Sander, you know, who couldn't be out of the closet. And I'm like, yeah, I guess they were, but they also weren't all murderous rapists as well at the same time. And knowing whenever you see a character like this, in like for myself as a gay man growing up when I did, I'm like, hey, guess what? This is what people were seeing as what queer was. And this is why I had no queer heroes on TV, and I identified with strong female characters instead of any strong queer characters, because the ones that did exist, well, it was all this. They were all the Sander Cohens, or they were tragic tales of death and suicide and lots of other awful stuff. So, hey, want to hear thoughts of everyone though. So, you know, if you have a different take on it, keep it respectful in the comments, or jump on the BQN Discord. There is a link for that. Would love to hear your thoughts on Sander Cohen. This is the Bargain Bin Gaymer. We focus on cheap and affordable video games here on the Bargain Bin Gaymer. Now, I think we've established this is 100% holds up as a game to play. But is it a bargain, Sam?
I would say absolutely. Before we started recording, we both kind of went to our respective online retailers and checked. And right now, Bioshock Remastered on its own is $4.99 American. But that is on sale. Normally, it is $19.99. As someone who paid $50 twice to buy Bioshock, I say it's a bargain. Could I steal a couple minutes here, Davey, to talk about something about Bioshock?
Sure.
Maybe not minutes, probably like a few seconds. Last year, I went through a very hard time. I will say it was probably the hardest time of my life, because the person who mildly caused it might be watching. Hi. But I will say that last year, it was like one sucker punch after another from life. And something that really helped me was Bioshock. I got out of the hospital from a major surgery, and the first thing I did was I played Bioshock for the first time in probably 10 years. And it just swept me away again. And it helped me through that time. And by the time I got to Infinite, I will say Infinite Story definitely helped me realize kind of the path forward. And now, a year later, I'm back doing what I went to college for. I own my own museum, and life's great. And so thank you, Bioshock.
Thank you, Bioshock. Look at the good you do. One final thought for me on these games is actually about the development behind it, which was 2K Games. Now, it was developed by 2K Games across a number of their different offices around the world, with a lot of the lion's share of work for the first Bioshock being done out of 2K Australia. Which was a really exciting thing for me at the time, to know that there was a really strong video game development happening in this country. Sad twist to this tale, though, is that 2K did wind up rolling back their Australian operations quite a bit, which is really hard because it's a very hard industry to get a job in this country. Unless you're doing indie development or something along those lines. But the 2K office used to be in the city of Canberra, where I lived for 10 years. And even long after they shut down, I could still walk down Lonsdale Street, Braddon, and see the imprint of the 2K logo on a window on a second floor above a restaurant. So it's, hats off to the team at 2K Australia. I hope that those developers and very talented staff have gone on to bigger and better things, and I hope you're all still making amazing video games today. Sam, what have you got going on, and where can our listeners and viewers find you online?
Well, I am back on social media, kind of. So you can actually find me at the Ancient Life, or the Museum of Ancient Life STL. .org. That is my corporate website. I am a museum director and curator, so I work primarily with dinosaurs. In fact, if I reach into my pocket right now, here's a dinosaur tooth.
What?
If you guys are interested in paleontology, or if you're passing through the Midwest and want to come to a cool museum and meet your favorite podcasting guest star, check us out.
Come on!
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Make sure as well that you follow the Bargain Bin Gamer over on Instagram and X. You can also find me streaming games live over on Twitch from time to time as well by searching for the Bargain Bin Gamer, Gaymer. Remember, the Bargain Bin Gamer is the YouTube show, Twitch channel, and podcast where I play the cheapest and shittest games out there so that you don't have to. It is part of a much larger network of podcasts called the BQN. You can support this and other BQN programs by signing up to be a patron over at patreon.com/BQN. If there are any Bargain Bin games out there you think I should be playing, please leave a comment below. Until next time, au revoir.
Double T Media.